Hey everybody, this is Modern Refugee in Middle Earth. I'm taking a little bit of a break today from my other channel to do some videos on my Lord of the Rings channel. And one thing with Lord of the Rings nowadays is the differences between the movies and the source material. Now, I am sort of a purist. I always revert back to the source material. And while I like the movies that came out 20 years ago now, there's a lot of things in the movies that were either left out or weren't really told the way that I personally would have preferred them being told. So I'm doing this video today on one of those particular differences. In fact, I thought it was quite a significant difference from the movies to what the book is, and it's on Merry's sword. Merry was one of the hobbits in The Lord of the Rings, and he was one of the hobbits in the Fellowship of the Ring. And he had a sword. Now, in the movies, they basically show a little bit later in the storyline, they basically show Aragorn given some garage sale swords to the hobbits, but that is not how it happened in the book at all. Those swords that the hobbits carried in the beginning of the book, in the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, had a very long lineage, and they were very, very important to the story further down the line. And I'm actually going to read a couple of little snippets out of the source material here for those that have never heard this on the swords of the Barrow Downs. Now, the Barrow Downs were never mentioned in the movies at all, or Tom Bombadil. And they're actually an important part of the very beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring. They're very important characters. And Tom Bombadil is a character in the book that basically rescues the hobbits from the Barrow Downs. And the Barrow Downs were basically graves that had evil spells placed on them. And Tom got him out of that situation. And when Tom did get him out of that situation, he gave him some swords that he took out of the Barrow Downs. And I'm going to read this to you here. For each of the hobbits, he chose a dagger, long, leaf-shaped, keen, of marvelous workmanship, damasked with serpent forms in red and gold. They gleamed as he drew them from their black sheaths, wrought of some strange metal, light and strong, and set with many fiery stones. Whether by some virtue in these sheaths or because of the spell that laid on the mound, these blades were untouched by time, unrusted, sharp, glittering in the sun. Old knives are long enough for swords for hobbit people, he said. Sharp blades are good to have if shire folk go walking east, south, or far away into dark and danger. He then told them that the blades were forged many long years ago by the men of Westernesse. They were foes of the Dark Lord, but were overcome by the evil king of Carandum in the land of Agmar. Now, the evil king of the land of Agmar, you actually know if you've watched the movies, he's the Witch King of Agmar. Those swords in the Barrow Downs were made specifically to fight against him back in the depths of time. And those swords play a very important role later in the book. And the other swords, because he gave each of the hobbits, Tom Bombadil gave each of the hobbits a sword. Each sword sort of had its own path. And the one sword that makes it all the way to the end of the book, not all the swords make it to the end, but the one sword that does make it to the end is Pippin's sword. And Pippin's sword, the lineage of these swords of the men of Westernesse are pretty much reconfirmed later in the story by Denethor. And when Pippin swears his allegiance to Gondor and to Denethor, Denethor recognizes the swords for what they are. And I'm going to read you another small little snippet out of the book here, and this is quite a bit further in the book. Then Pippin looked the old man in the eyes, for pride stirred strangely within him. Still stung by the scorn and the suspiciousness in that cold voice, little service, no doubt, will such a great lord of men think to find a hobbit, a halfling of the northern shire. Yet such as it is, I will offer in payment of my debt. Twitching aside his gray cloak, Pippin drew forth his small sword and laid it on Denethor's feet. A pale smile, like a gleam of cold sun on a winter's evening, passed over the old man's face. But he bent his head and held out his hand, laying the shards of the horn aside. "Give me the weapon," he said. Pippin lifted it and presented the hilt to him. "Whence come this?" said Denethor. "Many, many years lie upon it, and surely this is a blade wrought of our own kindred in the north and in the depths of the past. It comes out of the mounds that lie on the borders of my country," said Pippin, "but only evil wights dwell there now, and I will not willingly tell of them more." So Denethor is basically confirming the lineage of that particular sword, and then, the way I interpret it, the lineage of all the other swords that were found in the Barrow Downs, or the Barrow Blades as they're sometimes called. Now, here's the pinnacle of this story. In the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, Merry uses that sword to stab the Witch King, and then Éowyn kills the Witch King, stabs him in the face. He's the dreaded king of Angmar back in the depths of time. And here is another snippet at the end after Merry and Éowyn killed the Witch King. And still Meriadoc of the Shire stood there blinking through his tears, and no one spoke to him. Indeed, none seemed to heed him. He brushed away his tears and stooped to pick up the green shield that Éowyn had given him and slung it on his back. Then he looked for his sword that he had let fall, for even as he had struck his blow, his arm was numbed, and he now could only use his left hand. And behold, there lay his weapon, but the blade was smoking like a dead branch that had been thrust into the fire. As he watched it, it writhed and withered and was consumed. And so passed the sword of the Barrow Downs, work of Westernesse. But glad would he have been to know its fate who wrought it slowly long ago in the North Kingdom when the Dunedain were young. And the chief among their foes was the dreaded realm of Angmar and its sorcerer king. No blade, no though mightier hands had wielded it, would have dealt that foe a wound so bitter, cleaving the undead flesh, breaking the spell that knit his unseen sinews to his will. So if Merry wouldn't have gotten the barrow blade, and he wouldn't have used it to stab the Witch King, it didn't break the spell that protected him and held him together, so Éowyn could have killed him. And at this point in the story, when I originally read this, I came to the conclusion that there was a higher power looking over the fellowship at that point for all those things to fall into place. Now, it is often said Tolkien was extremely religious, and it's also often said that Tolkien wrote a pre-Christian history into the Lord of the Rings. And this is the one passage in this story that makes me feel that there was a higher power looking after the fellowship the whole time for all those things to fall into place. Because the Witch King would have never been destroyed if the lowly hobbit Merry wouldn't have been given this sword that was wrought back in the depths of time. And that's the only reason that the Witch King was defeated on the Pelennor Fields. And it's one of those subplots, sub-stories that are in The Lord of the Rings, when you go back to the source material, that you just don't get that background out of the movies. And it's the one thing, one of the many stories, and I'll probably go over some other parts of these stories in the future, but it's just one of those more intricate stories that were told. But anyway, this is Modern Refugee in Middle-earth, just discussing some of my favorite parts of The Lord of the Rings with you guys here today. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and you guys have a good one.